Thursday to you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today instead of on Monday. As I mentioned, a family issue came up, a good one though. I welcomed a little niece into the world on Monday night, which was very exciting, and I got to watch her older sister. I was on baby duty for her. So thank you so much for accommodating this change. Of course, if you're not able to join me today, Thursday, no problem. The replay will be live in the group. If you are catching the replay, please do drop a hashtag replay there into the comments. That will make sure that I can see any questions you have, make sure you feel good about the content we're discussing today. If you're catching me live, say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're joining from. If this is your first time joining a live with me, we've had quite a few new people in our group. My name's Anna Walker. I am a marketing and web strategist for private practitioners just like you. And everything that I do in this group, in these trainings, in the one-on-one things that I do with my clients is all about helping you get booked out in ways that are not just effective, but also authentic. Learning how to do marketing in a way that doesn't take forever, isn't overwhelming, and gets you clients. And today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is specialty pages. Not every single therapist I know knows what a specialty. We will, of course, start there, but you need to understand at the very foundation of what we're going to talk about today that your specialty pages are the #1 deciding factor on your website when it comes to a client actually taking the next step with you. Every page on your website serves a really unique purpose. We've done, entire trainings on your homepage. I offer entire resources on your about page, things like that. But your specialty page is what is actually going to convince someone to go ahead and take action with you. And that is why today we're going to dive into what they are, why they matter, and what makes a good one. So let's go ahead and dive right in. What is a specialty page? A specialty page is a dedicated page on your website. It will usually live under maybe the services section of your website or specialty section, whatever that is. And it's an individual page that is laser focused on one specialty or service that you provide. Specialty pages can be can kind of vary based on your practice. You may do individual therapy and couples therapy. Those could be 2 specialty pages. You may do trauma therapy and grief therapy. Those may also be 2 specialty pages. Whatever it is, your specialty pages have to be focused on one single thing. And the reason is actually kind of twofold. Why do specialty pages really ultimately matter? Why do they need to be so specific? #1 is for Google. These are so important for Google. I have looked at hundreds of therapist websites, and often the very first piece of advice I'll give to someone when we're hopping on a strategy call or something like that is break out your specialties into individual pages. And the main reason behind that is Google. SEO, I know, can feel like this really big, huge, scary thing, and there is a lot to it, but the fact is that you can make an SEO-friendly website and not be an expert and not pay people hundreds or thousands of dollars to do it for you if you follow some really basic things. When it comes to your specialty pages, the reason they're important for Google is because we want them to be focused on the one thing people are going to type into Google and find that specialty page for. So let's use the example again. If you say you offer both trauma therapy and grief therapy, if both of those things are living on a single page where someone just goes and you just have bulleted out, I do trauma therapy, grief therapy, EMDR, individual counseling, group counseling, and everything's just bulleted out, Google doesn't know. Google doesn't know you do both, and they don't know which one to rank you for and ultimately show you in the Google results for. Now, if you have a specialty page dedicated to trauma therapy and someone goes looking trauma therapy Nashville, Google knows to show them that page. Google knows that that is the one singular laser focus of that page and is therefore more likely to show it than if it just lives among a list of bulleted out items on a single page of its own. That's why creating individual pages is so critical. The other thing when it comes to Google ranking your website is that Google also looks at the length of your content. Studies show that the average word count of pages that live on page 1 of Google results average 2,200 words. That's a lot of words. And that's not to say that your specialty pages need to be these long novels. But what they do need to be is they need to dive pretty deeply into the topic of that specialty. You need more than just a single paragraph that talks about what you do and then tells people to contact you to learn more. You have to really answer the questions that are in your user's head and show that you are an expert in this space. Now, this isn't just good for Google, but it's also good, again, for your client. So that's the other reason that specialty pages are so important, is because of the client experience that someone can have when they land on one of those pages. Let's again use the example of doing trauma therapy and grief therapy. Someone may land on your homepage where you'll talk about both of those things. I offer trauma therapy and grief therapy. They'll learn about who you are. They might click into your about page and read your bio and understand what it is that you've been trained in. But it's when they land on the specialty page about grief therapy that they'll realize you are actually the expert they're looking for, because you can talk very, 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 very specifically to someone that is experiencing grief. Not just trauma. We're not talking generally anymore. We can get really, really specific and intimate, right? Because this is relational. We can get relational with this person and say, hey, are you struggling to get out of bed in the morning? Do you feel like you cannot live another day without, your loved one? Are you wondering how, the next 5 years are even going to happen in your life right now? That's where you can talk really specifically to the person experiencing grief versus the person experiencing trauma. It gives you an opportunity to connect on a more intimate and a deeper level with your potential client on that specialty page than if they're just reading about you and your practice in general. This is really powerful because when someone decides that they need to look for therapy, they have crossed a threshold, right? There has been a tipping point in their life that they know that they need some help. They are ultimately motivated by meeting with someone and sitting down with someone and ultimately handing their hard-earned money over to someone who understands them. And the best way that you can show that you understand someone is to get really, really specific about showing that you understand what it is that you're walking through. That's where you're going to use those really specific examples about, are you struggling to get out of bed? Does it feel like you can't take the next step? Those types of things. Or on the trauma side, do thoughts of your past still continue to keep you up at night? Do you feel like this is impacting your relationships with those closest to you? Are you wondering if there's a way to not live, within kind of the confines of this past trauma? See how those examples are different? That's why these specialty pages are so important, so that you can show understanding by talking really specifically to these people on each of those pages. So that is why specialty pages matter. Now let's get into what actually makes a good specialty page. What separates ultimately a good one from a bad one? Bad specialty pages do a couple things. Number one, they use jargon. And this is something, again, when I've looked at those hundreds of therapy websites, it's often one of the first things that I recommend. Take away any sort of clinical talk. So you're not going to be talking about CBD and EMDR and solution-focused therapy and evidence-based practices. You're not going to use those words. If you use those words, you're going to follow them immediately with a really easy to understand description. But the fact is that confusion is the absolute enemy of conversion. Listen to me when I say that. Confusion is the enemy of conversion. And ultimately what we're wanting people to do on your website is convert to someone that's looking for therapy to someone that wants to actually engage you as their therapist. That's called conversion. And confusion is the number one enemy of that. So if we can limit confusion, if we can eliminate confusion by not using words or terms or phrases that the average Joe, your ideal client, doesn't know without explanation, again, you lower this barrier that they have to cross in order to decide to work with you. They're already a little bit intimidated about having to reach out to therapy, especially if they're one that has never been to therapy before. And if you start using all these words and throwing them at them, you're not appearing impressive or like an expert. You're just appearing intimidating and hard to relate to. So again, when we're thinking about the fact that we need to be relational, we avoid jargon. The other thing that separates a bad specialty page from a good specialty page is that bad specialty pages, similar to jargon, are focused on things that you care about, not that your client cares about. So when you're deciding what your specialty pages should be about, ask yourself, how does my client think about the problems that they're experiencing? This is a good example is a client that I was working with fairly recently who serves young women who have relational trauma. That's what she loves to do. But the fact is that those young women coming to look for her don't realize they have relational trauma. So as we kind of wrestled with what to make her specialty pages, we needed to focus just on therapy for young adults, speaking about things like anxiety, depression, overwhelm, that would ultimately get into that relational trauma. You have to think about how the clients think about their problems, how the clients are thinking about what they're looking for, instead of what it is that you ultimately want to do. You have to meet in the middle with those two things. So you're not going to have a specialty page for EMDR therapy, even if that's what you love to do. Your page is going to be focused on trauma therapy or therapy for trauma victims or something like that, because that's how they think about it. And therefore, that's how they're going to relate to what it is that you're talking about on your site. Now, good specialty pages are broken out into the way that your client thinks about therapy. trauma therapy versus EMDR. The other thing is that they use you language. If you land right now, if you click over into your own specialty page or, what you've been wrestling with about maybe putting on your website, if you're saying I or the client more than you're saying the word you, then something's wrong. Again, this gets back to just being relational. You can use your website to be conversational. Don't feel like you have to be this overly formal, third person. Anna is a therapist that believes. Instead, say, I believe this. I know that you're facing this. I want to come alongside you. You are experiencing these types of problems, and together we can find a solution. See how much more approachable that is? Your website is about being approachable, and your specialty page is a really, really great opportunity for you to be able to do that. The other thing that you have to keep in mind for your specialty pages is they need to talk about both problems and solutions. I did a training on this a couple months ago, and it really resonated with a lot of you. We call this the marketing 1-2 punch. Talking about problems is really, really effective because we as humans are innate problem solvers, because someone that's looking for therapy is motivated by a problem. So talking about those problems creates a connection point. But if you don't then talk about solutions, you just leave them hanging on that problem, right? Similarly, if all you talk about is the relief someone's going to experience and all of these types of things without reminding them of what it is that they're suffering from and needing to, work through, you're not going to be nearly as effective, because people are going to be like, well, she doesn't get where I am right now. There's no way I can get to that solution. That is why you need to have both. That's why a good specialty page needs to talk about both problems and solutions, because it's only when they're used together that they're most powerful. So what should your specialty page actually have on it? Super, super good question. And so I'm going to walk you through the individual sections just real quick that I want you to think about as you're building out a specialty page or updating one if you're realizing my specialty page maybe isn't doing its full job right now. So the very, very, very first thing I want you to have on your specialty page is at the very top is the primary keyword for your specialty. Now that is a fancy way of saying, what do you want people to type into Google and find this page for? So if you're doing trauma therapy, it might say trauma therapy in Nashville. It is not a place to be cutesy or kitschy. It is the word. It is what's going to show Google at the very top, the title of that page. This is what I want people to type into Google and find me for, and show Google, hey, I am the expert here. Show me when people ask for these types of things. So that's the very, very first thing. After that, I want you, again, we're talking about problems and solutions. In the next section below that, I want you to paint a word picture of what your client is experiencing. Talk really specifically about things. I worked with a relationship therapist a few months ago. And we talked in that very first section about, do you feel alone in your marriage? Are you spending more time bickering than not? Are you laying awake at night wondering if maybe this isn't going to work after all? Are your kids starting to ask why mom and dad fight so much? All of a sudden, see how you're painting this word picture and showing someone, hey, I get you. You're hitting some of those really, really individual and unique pain points that this person is facing, and ultimately painting that word picture that shows them, hey, I understand you, so much so that I can repeat back to you what it is that you're going through right now. So that's that second section. After that, then I want you to talk about the solution. Talk about how therapy with you can ultimately lead them to the solution that they're looking for. So that will, what are you going to help them do? What's the 3 steps you will take them through throughout the therapy process that are going to give them the skills that they need to overcome these problems? And ultimately, what is going to change in their life? In the same way that you painted a word picture of what the problems are that they're experiencing, paint a word picture of what relief is going to feel like. You're going to fall back in love with your spouse. Remember what it was like when you dated for the first time. We can reignite that spark together. Start talking really specifically about what this healing, what this solution and this wellness is ultimately going to look like in their life, and use specific examples in that third section. After that, this is one of my favorite little sections. I want you to use just a short, impactful statement that will sum up the relief that they're looking for. You don't have to keep blank. I can help you blank. Something like that, like summarize everything that you've talked about in those couple of sections into a single sentence that says, hey, we can do this together, and then include a call to action button to schedule free consultation or take action right away. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to take action. And the next section of your specialty page, the last section, is really, really impactful if they haven't yet decided you're the one for them. And that is an FAQ section. I don't see enough therapists do this on their specialty pages, but it's actually a really, really helpful way, again, for SEO, for word count, for including keywords and doing all of that, really great, but mostly for your clients. The fact is that, again, someone is a little bit intimidated already when they're having to reach out to a therapist. This is a very vulnerable and intimate thing to have to do. And that means that they have a lot of questions in their mind. The more you can answer those questions, the more that you can help them, put them at ease as they are reading your specialty page and learning about your practice, the more likely they are to realize that you are actually the expert and the person that they want to sit down and have really vulnerable conversations with in order to feel better. So include questions like, how long do I need to be in therapy? What is a session like? What do I need to do to get started? Think to yourself, what do people often ask in our initial consult calls or our initial appointments that I can just answer right away? What questions are in their mind that I can say, hey, I understand you so much that I'm answering the questions that you are already just thinking of. And by doing that, you're, again, lowering barrier, you're creating a relationship, and you're doing something really, really impactful that other pages on your website don't do. This is the power. This is the power of a good specialty page. And if you have been listening to this training or watching it and thinking, am I doing these things right? The question to ask yourself is, if I was my ideal client, would I read this page and realize that I am an expert the way that I know that I am? If your expertise, if your therapy is coming through on that page, then you have done a good job. If you're not sure, then consider this outline I just gave you, these couple of sections that can be really impactful to create this journey and ultimately create relationship with your potential clients as they are scrolling the page. That is the beauty of a successful and strategic website. You build relationship before they even pick up the phone. And that is why these things are so, so, so important. If you're reading this and wondering, I don't even know how to get started after watching this, do take a look at the templates in the Private Practice Copy Shop. There's a template dedicated specifically to the specialty page. It walks you through word by word, truly Mad Lib style, how to create a specialty page like this for each of your specialties. There's some really helpful prompts at the beginning of your templates that will really help you flesh out, okay, who's my ideal client? What are they looking for? How do I ultimately show that I am an expert in this space? What do I offer that other people don't? And you use the answer to those prompts, you plug them into the template, and before you know it, you have a full specialty page that you can use on any website platform. You can be built with Brighter Vision, you can be on WordPress, Squarespace, whatever it is. This is the content that is ultimately going to connect with people and create relationship right on the page. I hope that's helpful for you. Tracy, I see you had a question. Do you ever recommend a practice have more than one separate website or PT profile? That is a complex question, Tracy. My initial answer to that would be no. However, if you have two very, very, very distinct offerings, it's worth considering. Generally, there is a way to have more than one niche. For instance, I did a training on this just a couple weeks ago and have a successful practice. You just have to identify what it is that is the same between these people, do some exercise to understand how certain people find you and others don't. So that's a really complex question. Tracy, I know you actually mentioned that you're kind of mulling this over. I would be happy to comment back and forth with you if you want to give me a little more information, we can brainstorm. But I think that's a little bit more nuanced and difficult to answer just for anyone. There is a time and a place for that, but not necessarily for everyone. So friends, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them into the comments. I will be just kind of hanging out here this evening and around if you want to chat. If you're catching this later, no problem. I, of course, will be notified when you drop that hashtag replay into the comments and we can chat some more. Do check out the templates in the shop if you are interested in pursuing a new specialty page that covers all of this information. If this is all you needed, if you're like, light bulbs are going off, I get it now, I'm so glad for that, and I cannot wait to see your new specialty pages. Feel free to drop those into the comments so we can be cheering you on. I appreciate you guys so much. I will talk to you next week.